on to our next speaker, Professor Ezzedine Shoukri. Ezzedine Shoukri Fishere. Am I pronouncing it right? Okay. He was trying to tell me how to pronounce it. I got it wrong again. In all cases, Professor Shoukri has a very diverse background. He studied political science and served as an Egyptian diplomat, left the diplomatic field and started to work as an academic, teaching at the American University in Cairo, of course teaching political science. But along with his interest in political science, he's also a creative writer who has produced some of the best pieces in our contemporary literary production. His last novel, which was published after the revolution and entitled The Exile, Bab al-Khuruj, takes us on a journey to the future of the revolution, the years to come. And I will not say what he says there. Probably I will leave it to the narrator of the novel to say it by himself. Please welcome.
Thank you very much. I was actually, since I got the invitation, was trying to think of something smart to say about revolution and creativity until I realized that they didn't invite me because I have something smart to say. They invited me because I wrote a novel. So I thought maybe this is what we should talk about. I actually decided to talk about myself, which I don't do very often, but I'll explain to you why I do this now. And when I look at my own writing and I think of revolution, the first thing, I like to think of myself as a writer before anything else. And therefore, my revolutionary side, if I may say so, doesn't materialize in joining mass protests or inhaling quantities of poisonous gas or any of the stuff that I admire Sahar and others for doing. I suck at all of that. My involvement in all of this has been through writing. And then I realized the following point is, I actually have been silent for 20 years. Since after I graduated, a couple of years in writing and research and so on, and I joined the Foreign Service in '89, and I've been silent completely for 20 years. And my revolutionary side, my protest, my rebellion, which I believe is an integral part of who I am, has always been. This side has been channeled in novels that were written and published almost in a clandestine manner. So even when I spoke through those novels about, and those novels are about protest, oppression, a lot of oppression, and social decay, and political, of course, blockage and decay. And the novels I wrote during my oath of silence, if I may say so, were passed unnoticed. It was the next thing to not publishing them, the next thing to writing them and keeping them. And of course, this didn't happen by coincidence, but I didn't realize until late. By 2008, I couldn't stay silent anymore. And at this point, I left the Foreign Service with no clear reason why I was doing this, and with no clear prospect what I'm going to do after this. And I worked on the third novel and published it, and took responsibility, if you want, for that third novel, which, not surprisingly, was about a collapsed building with 4 people trapped, trying to get out, but unable to, but not dead. And then I went on in speaking. And the way I see writing is an act of, it's a revolutionary act. It's It's even if through imagination, it's imagining, it's finding a different reality and talking about a different reality and presenting a different reality and rejecting the reality one has. And I think unless the writing is a writing for the political power, unless it's an authoritarian writing, it has no other option but to be subversive and rebellious. Now, this novel, The Exit, is actually, in more than a meaning, it's part of my own revolution, if you want. It's my revolution on the old, what you call the patriarch, or what you call the system or the regime, all the old in all its manifestations. But it's also a revolution against the new. And I'll explain that. And it's, in a way, against myself and my personal history and narrative. It's a revolution against the limitations that we all face in life. In this way, this novel is not a testimony about the revolution as it happened. It is not, it's not a work of a historian, and it's not even a prediction of the future, although a lot of readers like to read it in this way. But it's a struggle, and as we all struggle, this is part of my own struggle with my lived reality as I see it, but also with the limitations put on us as individuals, as citizens, and as writers, including the limitations of the drama itself. For example, the imposed dichotomy between naive optimism and realism that has to be tragic and sad. And one of the questions that I'm struggling with in this novel, and I'm not saying I'm answering, far from that, but one of the questions I'm struggling with in this novel is, can't we find joy without this being naive and precarious? Can't we find joy while at the same time taking account and paying respect and tribute to the limitations about the human condition that we have to face when we write? And I'm waiting to see what the answer will be by the readers. I hesitated a lot before I wrote that particular novel, because it's a novel about a reality that is still happening. It's a novel about characters that are not formed yet, not completely. It's about events that didn't happen, that didn't take place yet. It takes place in 2020. And it's a novel, and I like novels to be about people and personal stories and struggles. But it's marred in politics, and it is made of politics, and it's covered by politics. And my worst fear would be for someone to read it as a kind of a fictitious political report or something. And I had to write it serialized because I was possessed by this desire to write and publish immediately. And it's a novel written to a reader who has no time to read novels. You know, last year, now people have time to read novels. Last year, who would write a novel? Who would read a novel? But then also, I decided this is the time. This is the time to break with all these calculations. This is the time just to give it a try, and I did. I dropped the calculations and I wrote. And personally, I like what I did. The jury is still out. So, the novel, The Exit, is, it takes the shape of a letter by someone who's about to commit a very controversial act, and he's writing a letter to his son to explain why he's doing what he is about to do. And in the course of this explanation, he tells him the story of his own story, but also the story of us, say, between 1990 and 2020. And in a way, I have to admit, this revolutionary act is against my own personal history as someone who has witnessed, who's been working in the state for 20 years and staying silent. And it's a way of cleansing, if you want, and both taking responsibility and accepting responsibility for this, but also putting an end to it. And it's also a revolutionary act against a whole generation and mentality. Not exactly my generation, but the previous one, and the previous ones, and the previous ones who are still in power, and their mindset. It's against the patriarch, who I think is not just about institutions, but it's also a mindset, and above all a mindset. And this mindset that has been hovering over us and us all Egyptians and preventing our personal growth to take place. But it's also an act of revolution against the new and against ideologies that are smug in their sense of self-righteousness. And I make no exception for all available ideologies and ideological organizations and groups. And I think what the novel is taking issue with all of these groupings and ideologies. And this extends to my friends, the political activists, and their whatever they're doing. I leave it for them to describe it and name it. But it's also a protest against their style of doing politics, which I think is probably leading us towards an imminent disaster. So, like the revolution itself, this novel is an act of unmasking. It's about nudity, if you want. It is nakedness of society and politics and human condition in Egypt in this particular time. And at least this is how I'd like to see it. And in this way, I don't think creativity and revolution are inseparable. I think they're one with multiple facets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ezzedine Shoukri, for sharing. Okay? Now I got it right this time. For your passionate and deep narrative of your own narrative. Yeah. It's a question of unmasking, of reaching conciliation one way or the other, through exposing, through rewriting. It's a story or a novel about anticipation that does not expect anticipations at all, or futuristic writings. I need to correct myself. When I introduced Dr. Fishere, okay, I said that the title of his novel is The Exile. It is The Exit, actually. Bab al-Furuq is The Exit, okay? So I need to correct myself. Is it available in English translation? I expect it to be available very soon because of the critical row that that it is producing, and because of the passion that I can feel now on this panel. So thank you very much.